Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. You're warm welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Assurance Committee. We are, I think, all in attendance. A couple of colleagues are attending online, but a warm welcome to you as well. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No issues.
And are there any declarations of interest that have not already been declared which are relevant to the business of this meeting?
No.
Let's move on to the draft minutes of the Audit and Assurance Committee held on the 7th of May 2024. First of all, any matters of accuracy? Helen, I think you have one.
Yeah, so on page 1, Adam Hopkins and Alan Williams are referred to as audit managers. The titles are audit lead. So you can amend that. And on page 4, there's reference to materiality being 1.8%. It's 1%.
Thank you for those corrections. Any other points of accuracy, please, colleagues? No? In which case we move to the action log, and over to you, David.
Thank you. So I'm waiting for the page to open. So all the actions are or on today's check.
Thank you. So going back to the minutes, are there any other matters arising related to matters in the minutes of the last meeting? No? Thank you very much. Let's move on to part 2, matters for consideration. And we move straight to 2.1, which is internal audit. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be brief on this. The performance indicators you can see are all agreed. So again, timely responses overall across the reviews for the year for 23-24. And table 2 on page 4 of our document is looking forward to 24-25. We have one review which is close to completion. We have one review which is almost good to go, and the single lead employer, we had our meeting with the medical director on Friday this week just to scope out the review and the details behind that review. Similarly, the information governance piece, that brief has been agreed as well. So that's the 42 piece. So actually good progress in 24-25. And in terms of bringing things through to the October committee, we're on schedule.
That's good news. Any questions or comments on the progress report? No? I just had one comment really. You draw out the fact that you're meeting regularly with the Board Secretary, Director of Finance and Audit Wales colleagues. I noticed that in the single lead employer audit, you're also liaising with NWSSP's internal audit,
yes.
Which is good news.
Yes, Chair. So they have a specific piece, an internal review at the moment, looking at the single lead employer process from a shared services perspective. So the idea being that we'll hopefully be able to knit together our review we're doing specifically with an HEIW and align that with the shared services work as well to get a wider view of the whole process.
So we should actually get an end-to-end view.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking.
The only component that would be missing from that would be the individual health boards. They have the responsibility.
Yeah.
But those two key components are shared services and the HEIW component.
But I think that addresses one of the longer term concerns of the committee about how do we get that sort of view. So that's really good news. Thank you. Okay. Yes, John.
Yeah, can I just check for the plan 24-25 to consider the approach to managing changes to independent members? Can I presume that the draft brief had been issued to the board secretary, or has it been circulated and I've missed it?
It's gone to the board secretary. It's gone to me.
So what's the plan for that, David? Are we going to have sight of that?
Yes, you will have sight of that. I'll share that with you. And one consideration is whether we need to broaden it out to include exec directors. But yes.
Thank you.
So just to say, we're meeting tomorrow actually to pick up offices.
Okay, so it's still being
Yes,
discussed.
it's in draft at the moment, but as I said, we'll meet tomorrow. And,
Excellent. Let's move on now to item 2.1.1b, which is the pharmacy training internal audit report. Ken.
Good morning, everyone. The only report we're bringing to the committee today is our review of pharmacy training, which is the last report for 23-24. Some major changes were introduced to the training programme in 2021, and these have to be fully implemented by 2026. The changes were managed through the undergraduate clinical placement programme, and our audit focused on the changes made to the training programme so that trained pharmacists gain the necessary experience to meet the new education and training standards for pharmacists. So in total, we've raised 5 medium priority recommendations, and this has resulted in an overall opinion rating of reasonable assurance. The main issues arising from the work was the need to complete the standard operating procedures and also to transfer the ongoing project risks to departmental participants. I'll take the report as read, so if anybody's got any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions or comments? John?
Thank you, Chair. Some points of clarification, if I may. The report talks about the need to increase the placements. In paragraph 2.2, it talks about the numbers increased up to 14,024-25, and later on in the report it talks about the numbers in 2.12. The numbers were 2006 in 22-23, 5,623-24, with a projection there for 10,000 in 25-26. So there seems to be a little bit of a disparity in the numbers. Or am I reading that wrong? That's the first point. And then also, from what I can see and from what I've read, and if my memory serves me correct, there are a number of elements that are outstanding, and yet the report is recommending that now, and some of the recommendations not completed, that this now becomes business as usual. And yet there are elements that are outstanding.
So
it's a good point around 2.2 and the disparity in numbers. I wonder whether that's cohorts of placement, like applications on numbers of students placements. Yeah, I wonder it's just the way that we split the numbers out and what they are, but we'll double check that and make that correction.
okay, so that can be clarified offline.
Yeah.
What about the other point that John has raised?
So sorry, the other point was around the.
Well, it talks about, Paul, some of the SOPs still not being completed. And if you look at the timelines are not within what was expected in terms of agreed period. So they remain outstanding, and yet within the report, the recommendation now is that this can be closed down and it's business as usual. So I'm just a little bit concerned that there are elements that are still outstanding, and yet we've not had assurance as to when these are going to be completed, and particularly the timelines around the SOPs. That was my understanding.
So the completion, I'm sorry, I'm not close to what management actions, what timings they're taking to complete all of this. So I'm struggling to sort of answer the.
So the management response says, the management response on the SOPs says,
Yeah.
complete handover into business as usual with all SOPs and key documents
Yeah.
retained in a secure folder.
Yeah.
And I presume that means completed and
By the end of July, yeah.
yeah, and retained in a secure folder, and that should be done by the end of July.
Yeah.
So
But
I think what you're saying. Sorry,
But
John,
I'm
go on.
sure, Chair, I've read that there remain SOPs outstanding. Now I'm trying to locate where I read that. I think that needs to be checked then, rather than wasting time. I'm sure I read that there were elements that were still outstanding.
John, thank you for your feedback. I'll catch up with you after the meeting, and we'll look into the SOPs that are causing concern, and I'll take that information. I'll take that information back to the team and ask for further clarification for you.
That's fine. And Chair, if I may ask one other question, we all know that that in terms of the quality of the provision in relation to this area, placements are absolutely critical. And the report talks about the number that is going to be increased because commission numbers are changing, etc. Did this report or this audit look at the quality? I didn't pick up how are we managing the quality of these additional placements and what we are going to be doing in order to monitor those. Or was it outside of brief?
We didn't look at the quality as part of this audit.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. I think you've raised some important points there. And I think this is another case where the management responses are very brief. We have detailed input from internal audit about matters that need to be resolved. But there are single sentence responses to those detailed recommendations. For instance, matter arising for the Cardiff University contract and quality framework, the contract hasn't been properly signed. It's only been signed by one of the parties. Nowhere in the management response does it actually say that the contract has now been signed or is going to be signed. And that doesn't seem to me to be a sufficient response from management in terms of valid matters that are being raised here. And similarly, matter arising 5, which does actually go in part to quality, John, because every site supervisor has either to attend some training or to watch a video. And there's a requirement that complete auditable training records be kept. The management action doesn't actually fully commit to that. Review existing processes to establish the availability of data and update processes to accommodate the data if available. I think, for assurance purposes, we would like to see efforts being made to actually produce a system which gives the assurance that site supervisors are actually being trained. So, again, Gladys, I think this is somewhere where we need internally to be giving more detail in response to the matters raised by internal audit.
I know in this case, spoke to the medical director, and he did say that there is an action plan in place that's been drawn up.
Yeah.
So there's to be more detail probably than what we've got here.
Exactly. Yeah. So that should have been in the management response. So if we as an audit committee are going to take assurance, we do need actually to know the matters are being addressed. So, John, is that another hand?
It is, Chair. I've identified it's 2.7 is the point that I'm referring to. However, key SOPs and a BAU operational documentation have yet to be completed. We have therefore provided reasonable assurance. That's the paragraph I was referring to. Thank you, Chair.
So there's an implicit conflict between those two things. Thank you for highlighting, John. Okay, so
So, Chair, would you like us to go back to management and get them to have another look at their management responses and then bring it back again for completeness?
I think that would be good practice.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what we as an audit committee need is the assurance that these matters are being addressed, and to have a little more detail in the management responses.
We'll go through that tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. So with those provisos, we note the internal audit progress report for assurance, and we note that we have received the pharmacy training internal audit report, but that we'd like some more detail on the management responses before we can take assurance from it. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, internal audit. We now turn to Audit Wales, update on accounts progress. Helen.
Okay, so just a short update today. So we received a draft accounts as per the timetable. They're of a good quality, and Martin and the team uploaded a number of working papers that we've also used for our audit, and we've had timely responses to our audit queries as well. So a massive thanks to the team for that. We've largely completed our audit now. There's a few loose ends to tie up, but we're largely there. We've received a draft account and we've checked through the amendments and we're happy with those, just awaiting a revised performance report to review, and then that will be the revised draft review then. ISA 260, so our audit of accounts report summarising our work, has been drafted and sent over to Martin and Glyn for their comments. So hopefully we'll receive those with detailed management responses this week. Just to make the committee aware, there is one national issue that is currently outstanding which may affect the accounts. So this is with regards to the junior doctors pay award. The ballot closes on Wednesday, so hopefully we'll know soon after that if they have accepted the pay award or not. If they accept the pay award, we are anticipating a non-adjusting post-balance sheet event disclosure within the notes to the accounts. If they do not accept, we'll just have to review what the next stages of the action are and the timelines on that. But we would think that the accounts would probably be signed off before anything further is agreed on that. So we'll bring our report to the next committee on the 1st of July.
Thank you. Any questions for Helen? No? Thank you. And then we duly note the verbal update. And then we move on to 2.3, the procurement compliance report. Is this you, Deborah?
It is, thank you, Chair. In the 2 months since the last report, just reporting that we've had 2 single quotation actions, 3 single tender actions, 4 compliant contract extensions, 7 change control notices which are allowable under procurement regulations. They are compliant, and 2 file notes. These are obviously the ones that we're most concerned about, and we have offered departments training in relation to this. The associated documents details each of those on the few pages, and just a note on our training. From October this year, the procurement regulations are due to change, and all of us in procurement are currently undergoing some deep dive training sessions. they are due to conclude at the end of July. Once concluded, we'll then review the internal training sessions that we offer, HEIW and obviously other health boards that we support. So they will hopefully be concluded during August. So we are hopeful that the new training sessions will be rolled out in September sometime. But if you do, please bear with us. Although we're undergoing some deep dive training sessions, the Welsh specific training sessions haven't been released to us yet. So we're hopeful for the September date, but that could go slightly into October, at the beginning of October. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions for Deborah? John?
It's not a question as such, but I've gone through the papers and noted some of the single tender actions again, and perhaps I'll take it outside the way. I'm nervous about some of them in terms of it'd be interesting to see the justification for some of those. And the reason I'm being cautious about that, because I don't want to be in any way conflicted in my interest, but it would be interesting to see, and perhaps I'll raise that with Glyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's good to see that we have only 2 file notes this time, which I think is the shortest list we've had.
Yes.
Am I right in remembering that engagement of speakers has been by workforce has been an issue previously?
Yes, it has, and we recently, well, it was February that we put a framework in place. So we were working at the tail end of last year on a framework, and that was awarded on February this year. It encompassed speakers as well as mentors, coaches, and we had a really good uptake in the number of Welsh suppliers on that framework. It was over 50%. So I can send some more information regarding that, but that was quite a successful framework for us.
And do you think that that will eliminate these breaches?
Yes, I've got some figures again that I can send in, but that would really target the single tender actions that we raised so many of.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Okay, we are asked to note that report for assurance, and we so do. Let's move to counter fraud, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a brief report on this occasion. I'll just pick out a few points from it. I'll take the report as read. A couple of the key points really. I've added a new table to the report which sort of benchmarks the e-learning across NHS Wales. And it's quite clear to see that when mandated, obviously it's undertaken in much greater volume. We've in relation to education also, we've started our new round of bursary specific awareness sessions travelling around the various universities in NHS Wales, and I've given a brief summary there of where we've been and how many people have attended. We've done one more corporate induction event. Unfortunately, only one person attended that. We have republished and advertised for the event we have ongoing tomorrow. But on checking this morning, there's still only one person coming for that, unless you, Glenn. So we can discuss that after if sure I can. In relation to prevention, we've had a couple of alerts. One was in relation to a cyber scam. It's quite far removed from HIW, to be fair. It was a different organisation, and it was a third-party supplier to that organisation. But we did carry out the necessary checks just to make sure that HIW hadn't had contact with that company, and since that time, that's all been shored up by the DHEW cybersecurity team. And we had another intelligence alert nationally from the CFA, Counter Fraud Authority,
and that was in relation to a person working in NHS England who was providing false certificates of sponsorship or employees there. Again, it's quite far removed from HRW, but the relevant inquiries showed that there were no issues. Henry's come along to the meeting today and will be going into some detail in relation to fraud risk in the private meeting, so I won't go into that. The NFI initiative is now finished, and we've had a couple of referrals, which I'll go into in a little bit more depth in the private meeting, and significant salary repayments. I'm pleased to say that we haven't had any reported to us in this quarter, which is good. And that's it, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on counter fraud? I noticed, this is a comment rather than a question, I guess, that in your report you've included a table which shows which health boards are now including counter fraud in mandatory training. And because you've shown it as a table over time, it's possible to see the change in engagement with training in those health boards and authorities that are now making it mandatory. I think that's a really interesting piece of information. Given that we're at the bottom, well, there's one below us, but in terms of take-up, and we are a commissioning organisation, which brings with it its own risks. It might be useful to bring that table to the attention of the executive to take a view on whether counter fraud should be included in the mandatory training. Thank you. No further questions. Then we thank you and note the report and move on to losses and special payments. And over to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. This is the standing report we bring to each audit and assurance committee, setting up the losses and special payments incurred by HAW. And this one covers a period up to the end of May 2024. As you've seen in the report, the only types of losses we've incurred are salary overpayments, and they set out in section 3.1, which shows the end of May we had we'd incurred 33 losses, totaling £31,800 since April 2022, and of them 10 remain outstanding, and the balance of 13.3 thousand to be recovered. And obviously, we're still working to recover those. At the last meeting, we were asked to provide some additional context around the types of salary overpayments and the timing of the salary overpayments, just to see where they are occurring and how that's happening. So I included a few additional charts into this report, which shows sort of the picture of it. They're in section 3.2 of the report. Chart 1, that shows the number of overpayments incurred each month, and that's the blue bar chart, and the value each month is the orange line chart. I think you can see consistently we generally get 0 or 1 a month, but there are little pockets of information of additional overpayments that are incurred. We use this information in combination with the dashboard that the payroll send us to look at other pockets of issues, whether individual managers, teams, or in terms of our processes. So based on tie-up, so we use this to look at identify where improvements are needed. Table 2 then just goes on to show this the average number, just to get a feel for it really, and the average is about £937 overpaid per individual. But as I say, it does vary significantly from £19 up to 2,900 is the largest we've had over the last since we were formed actually HAW. And then chart 2, that shows the cumulative position, which I guess as the organisation has grown, I guess we expected that it has increased, but it did increase from the end of 2022, but it's been fairly consistent around the £8,000 mark then. We do a lot to recover. It does take amount of administrative time to deal with these. So, actually resolving or stopping them happening in the first place is essential. And that's the type of work that we've been doing to try and identify how we can do that. So that's just a bit of a brief overview of where we've been over the past few years. Fairly consistent, we think, and we do a lot of work to keep on top of that. That's a summary report for the losses and special payments.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions? John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Martin. And what was pleasing to see was the work streams and the new digital systems that have been put in place in order to try and mitigate some of these losses and overpayments. And it talks about those being implemented. I presume we're a few months into that now, and that there's a review taking place in terms of the number of errors, etc. So my question is, in terms of the electronic systems that have now been put in place and improved dashboards, etc., with regards to errors, are we seeing the benefit of that and the effectiveness of that in terms of this particular issue?
I would say so from an operational point of view, but I think it needs a little bit more time just to just to prove that. I guess as a manager myself, it is a lot easier to complete the online form when someone's leaving. I did it last week, and it takes a few minutes, and so I think it must have. I guess I just need to come to you with evidence of that, really, in terms of how that's put. But it does feed a number of. It's not just salary overpayments; it helps in terms of returning equipment to the team. So I think it's as a wider role than just this. But yeah, if I can have a little bit more time, perhaps just to analyse that, then I can give you a evidence answer then perhaps to that.
I think that would be helpful, Chair.
Thank you, John. I think you've raised the issue that I was going to raise, so we will now simply move to note the report for information. So let's move on to 2.6, corporate risk register.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Bore da, bawb. Felly, ar hyn o bryd, mae yna 9 risg ar y gofrestr. O'r hynny, mae 4 wedi cael eu sesu'n goch, 4 yn amber, ac 1 bellach yn cael ei ystyried yn ddigwyddiad, achos bod e wedi digwydd. O ran y 4 coch, mae 1 yn ymwneud gyda seibr diogelwch, yr ail yn ymwneud gyda cyllid Llywodraeth Cymru, yn cael ei gynnal ar lefel presennol ar gyfer y cynllun addysg a hyfforddiant blwyddyn nesaf. Mae'r trydydd risg unwaith eto yn ymwneud gyda'r cynllun addysg a hyfforddiant, ond y tro yma yn ymwneud gyda oedi o ran derbyn cymeradwyaeth gan Llywodraeth Cymru, ac mae'r 4edd risg sydd wedi cael ei sesu'n goch yn ymwneud gyda newyddion straeon negyddol amdan cymdeithion meddygol neu Physician Associates. Mae'r digwyddiad, sef risg 8, yn ymwneud gyda prif ysgolion yn methu recriwtio yn digon o myfyrwyr ar gyfer y cyrsiau nyrsio iechyd meddwl. Felly papur i'w nodi ydy hon, ond hefyd yn gofyn i'r Pwyllgor, os gwelwch yn dda, i dynnu risg 8 oddi ar y gofrestr a i fod o bellach yn cael ei ystyried fel digwyddiad. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Diolch, Dafydd. Any comments or questions? John?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we'd all agree the cyber issue that was faced by the London hospitals over the last few weeks makes it real in terms of the red risk that we've got noted there. And so I guess it's helped me appreciate the significance of that risk in terms of cyber security and the impact potentially it will have for us. I think in previous meetings we've had discussions about new mitigations being put in place and that we should see this risk score changing.
John,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but we've got the opportunity for a wider discussion on that in the private meeting today,
okay,
where
that's
so
fine.
quite a detailed paper.
That's fine.
But sorry to interrupt at that
That's
point.
fine.
Any other points you wanted to make around the risks?
The
Other
only
risks?
other one was the PA one. In terms of the score that's noted, do we have an update on whether that score has now changed even since? Because this is such a live issue since these papers have been written and submitted.
I'm thinking that the score remains the same. It was considered about exact, I think last week, and score remains the same at 15, so it continues to be assessed as a red.
Thank you. And we've had some extensive briefing on this as independent members.
Yeah. Yes,
Which I think is has kept us well informed on this particular position. So we note where we are with the risks and the contents of the report. We're asked to approve the removal of risk 8 on the basis that it is no longer a risk, it is actually realised. And I note that the paper says that we can reopen it if needed for the next academic year. So I think that's entirely appropriate. So we approve the removal of that one event. Okay, so we're going swimmingly. Let's move on to 2.7, board assurance framework, including strategic risks and strategic risk control framework.
So diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly, papur yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor i nodi'r fframwaith sicrwydd y bwrdd, neu'r BAF, mwyn sicrwydd ydy hon. Mae'r BAF yn parhau i esblygu. Mae'n adlewyrchu'r ffaith fod y ddogfen ddynamic. Mae'n adlewyrchu'r newidiadau da ni'n gwneud o leia flynyddol i'r cynllun tymor canolig integredig, neu'r IMTP, ein nodau strategol, ein risgau strategol a'n fframwaith rheoli risgau. Bydd aelodau yn cofio bod nhw wedi ystyried a cefnogi ein risgau strategol ar gyfer eleni nôl yn mis Ebrill. Ac yn y cyfarfod hynny, nath y pwyllgor hefyd ystyried ein fframwaith rheoli risg strategol a cynnig nifer o newidiadau'r ddogfen. Mae'r ddogfen bellach wedi cael ei ddiweddaru i adlewyrchu'r mewnbwn hynny. Felly, i gloi, da ni'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor nodi'r os gwelwch yma.
Diolch, Dafydd. Any questions or comments on these papers? John?
Thank you, Chair. So thank you, David, for the paper, and I think the paper reflects the ongoing maturity of the organisation in terms of its government, or in terms of its governance arrangements. I've got no issue with the paper as such, and I think it covers things as they are. I'm just raising a point, and it may be something that we need to discuss outside of the meeting or as part of a board development session, but I think we're at a position where perhaps we need to further refine and develop our governance arrangements. And if we look at the paper does talk about assurance significantly within that board assurance framework. That's exactly what it is. But if we look at examples elsewhere within the sector, and particularly the Good Governance Institute, there are other elements that we could adopt in order to improve our board assurance framework, and I'm particularly referring to what I would recall as the AAA, which is the alert, advise and assure. And I'm just wondering whether, just to note for the audit today, that perhaps we should look to further improve the robustness of our board assurance framework, whereby we refer to some good practice that is adopted elsewhere, and the one, as I said, I'm referring to is the alert, assure and advise mechanisms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John.
Well, yeah, thank you for that feedback, John. I'd be delighted to look into that further with you, and obviously anything we do to improve our BAF and to adopt best practices, obviously that'd be welcome. So yeah, very much want to have a conversation with you.
I think that suggestion of putting it into a board development session is actually really valuable, John. I've participated in those sorts of sessions elsewhere in the sector, and they have been really valuable in continuing the maturing of the BAF. Okay, but in the meantime, we note the BAF for assurance, but look forward to further discussions at a later date. Okay, I'm going to keep going because it seems a little early to break. So while we're on a roll, let's continue. So, audit recommendations tracker, and it's you, David.
Yes, diolch yn fawr iawn, bawb. Felly, papur er mwyn sicrwydd ydy hon yn rhoi diweddariad ar yr argymhellion a dderbynwyd gan un archwilwyr mewnol ac allanol. Na ddechrau'n gyntaf, am yna cyfanswm yn rhywun gynnau o 38 argymhellion ar y traciwr heddiw. Na ddechrau gyda ein archwilwyr mewnol. Ar hyn o bryd, yna 26 argymhelliad mewnol. Ac o'r rhain mae 6 wedi cael eu set yn goch, 17 yn wyrdd a 3 yn amber. O ran ein argymhelliadau allanol gan Archwiliad Cymru, mae 2 ar hyn o bryd wedi cael eu set yn goch, 9 yn wyrdd ac 1 yn amber. Felly, da ni'n gofyn i'r Pwyllgor Ysgolch Mlaen nodi'r adroddiad, yn ail i nodi'r cynnydd o ran y gwaith sydd wedi'i wneud. Ac da ni'n gofyn fod y Pwyllgor yn cymeradwyo bod yr argymhellion sydd wedi cael eu asesu yn wyrdd yn cael eu dynnu oddi ar y gofrestr ysgolch yma. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Diolch, David. Any comments or questions on this paper? I think it's pretty clear. And so in the internal audit area, we have no high recommendations overdue. In the external audit Wales area, we have 2. Are we likely to see some progress in these soon? So the HIW Workforce Planning Review. Those 2.
Yeah, so the report there is saying that we anticipate that they'll be completed during June 2024. I'm afraid I've had a more recent update, so I'll bring that back to the committee in anticipation that it's going to be completed within the next week. So we will circulate an update to the committee at the beginning of next week, just to confirm where we are. That's okay.
Yeah. That's why all recommendations are important. The high ones are particularly important. Thank you. So We note the report, we've considered the progress, and we are content to approve the recommendations on the audit tracker that have been assessed as completed, and therefore given a green rating, are withdrawn from the tracker. Thank you. Right, we move on to 2.9, and it's you again.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly, papur cynnig sicrwydd ydy hon unwaith eto. Mae o'n canolbwyntio gan amlellu'r gwaith y grŵp IGIM yn ei gyfarfod diweddarau nôl ar y 15 mis Mai. Byddwch yn nodi bod y grŵp wedi ystyried sawl ardal o fewn ei faes ac un ardal o ffocws oedd gwaith y grŵp o ran rheoli recordiau. Roedd y grŵp yn falch iawn o allu croesawu'r diweddariad ar y gwaith da sydd wedi wneud o ran y toolkit y gwybodaeth canolbwyntio. Byddwch hefyd yn nodi fod 9 cais FOI wedi cael ei derbyn yn ystod y cyfnod dan sylw, a bod 5 o'r rhain wedi cael ni wedi ymateb i 5 o'r rhain o fewn y amser gyfynol, ond bod 2 wedi disgyn tu allan i'r amser hynny, ac roedd hynny'n adlewyrchu'r ffaith bod y ceisiadau hynny yn arbennig o gymleth gyda elfennau yn wneud gyda DPE. Felly, papur i'w nodi ydy hon sgwrs yna, hapus i dderbyn unrhyw gwestiwn gan y pwyllgor yn ymwneud gyda ateb.
Diolch, Dafydd. Any questions? I was interested to read about the data breaches. And that no data breaches required escalation. So there were 6 data breaches, and none of them required reporting to the Information Commissioner. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the bar with regards to, so we applied the definition as to whether it does need to be escalated, and in respect of each of those instances, there was no need to escalate the matter to the ICO.
And everyone that has been involved in a data breach, I take it, is offered some support and training in respect of how better to manage data.
Training is offered across the board. I mean, it's quite often the case it's an email that's been sent to the wrong individuals, so that lack of focus of obviously training is offered. But it's unfortunately a common area example would be sending the email to the wrong individual, it's similar name. So it is an element of focus, also an element of training. But you can't eradicate completely data breaches given the nature, but it's obviously it's good to be able to report that none of the breaches that have occurred breaches that are really necessary to share with the ICO.
Thank you. And again, the report covers cyber security responses, but we can discuss that further in the private meeting.
Yes, we have a comprehensive report coming up.
Yes.
Private session will show.
Thank you. So we note the contents of the report for assurance. Let's move on to 2.10, the review of the committee's terms of reference. And is this you again, Daniel?
It is me again, Cadeirydd. Byddai'n fer iawn. Mae wrth gwrs yn ymarfer da bod y pwyllgor yn archwilio ac yn ystyried ei cylch gorchwil in terms of reference yn blynyddol. Felly dyma'r cyfle i'r pwyllgor ystyried ei cylch gorchwil ac i cynnig sylwadau os gwelwch yn dda.
So thank you, Daniel. So there've been a few changes which are marked in red on the terms of reference. Does that include the one that Lynn raised?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, had a comments back from Glyn, feeling that we could be more explicit in terms of the committee's responsibility around IJM, and that is now spelled out within the tender reference. Thanks.
Excellent. Any comments or suggestions on the terms of reference? They're quite comprehensive. Yeah. In which case, thank you for the opportunity to review these, and let us vote them with the amendments as shown.
If I could just add, Chair, this forms a part of our more general annual review of our standing orders. Obviously, in terms of reference forming part of our standing orders, each one of our three committees will be considering their terms of reference at their next meeting, and the intention is to take the standing orders to the I think to the meeting of the board in September or November, depending on the next grants committee, and then we'll undertake an annual review of our standing orders as well.
Thank you. That's helpful clarification, Darren. Okay, that brings us to the end of part 2. Part 3 is for information, includes the Audit and Assurance Committee's Forward Work Programme. Thank you, Sarah. And that takes us on. Are there any questions or comments on that? No, thank you. Is there any other business?
Not for the open session. Nothing else has been notified.
Okay. So the next open meeting will be on Thursday, the 4th of July, 2024. It'll be the final accounts meeting, and look forward to receiving the final outputs of your hard work at that meeting. So I will bring this meeting to a close, and I'll read the standard statement. In accordance with the provision of Section 1(2) of the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, it shall be resolved that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the latter part of the meeting on the grounds that it would be prejudicial to the public interest due to the confidential nature of the business transacted. This section of the meeting is to be held in private session. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. Thank you all. This meeting is now closed.
Thank you, Chair.
And we can start.